Council has discussed crypto regulations and legislations at length, and we have come to the conclusion that instead of regulating, we are going to ape a fat bag each into laptop and pump it to over $1,300,000,000,000,000,000,000,000 market cap. Let's go crackheads.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. Now, you knew I had to make a video today because everyone is obviously panicking. There's a lot of new people in the space. As you guys could see, Bitcoin hit a brand new all-time high, almost kissing around the $74,000 area, and we have had a bit of a pullback since then. In fact, we're sitting below $70,000. In fact, we're sitting below the previous all-time high. So everyone is very concerned about what is happening with crypto right now. Now, keep in mind, we really haven't had any of these major pullbacks yet. We haven't had the big 20%, 30%, 40% pullbacks. I mean, technically, we did have it right over here on, the 5th, and by the next day, it was basically bought right back up again. So what I wanted to talk about was something very interesting, because if we come over here and we have a look, right, this is BlackRock. You could see these are the inflows. The inflows are clearly growing at an exponential rate. In fact, if we actually come over here and have a look at the year to date, the spot Bitcoin ETF is literally blowing everything else out of the water, all of these different sectors. And what's interesting is actually, if we come down here, you can see that gold is actually the second of the most outflows, which is quite interesting, which does send the signal that maybe some of these gold bugs are actually switching over to Bitcoin as the better alternative. But why is price falling? Should we be concerned? Did we all just get blindsided and that was the top? Well, I do want to talk about the problems that are currently surrounding Bitcoin right now. And before you jump to conclusions, this is not a bearish video at all. In fact, if you watch this video all the way to the end, you'll understand that now is quite possibly the time for some of the greatest opportunities. I'm going to get into all that in just a bit, but if we come over here, this was over on my X account. If you guys are not following me over on Twitter, it seems like there's pretty much three camps of people right now. So there's the first that are calling for a shortened cycle, basically saying that we've gone up way too fast. This is not sustainable. Everyone is wrong, and we're gonna peak out sometime this year. I've heard some people calling for an a top for Bitcoin, possibly even by the middle of this year, around summer. So that's like the first theory, right? The second is just the good old-fashioned 4-year cycle. Bitcoin just keeps doing what it's been doing for the past 15 years. We should be putting in that new all-time high sometime around 2025, and everything is good. The third is the Bitcoin super cycle idea, which is sort of related to what gold did when they had the ETF approval back in 2004, where gold basically went on an 8-year tear to new all-time highs. Now, keep in mind, it did have those 30% drawdowns, right? But ultimately, it continued until it peaked out 8 years later. So let me know right now what you guys think about this. Do you think that we're in a shortened cycle, the 4-year cycle, or the super cycle? I will give you my opinion on that by the end of this video. So what I wanted to get out of the way super quick, because I have a lot of things I want to go over, I wanted to just start with the TA really fast. I'm not going to harp on this, but again, lots of people saying, well, what was the significance of this $73,000, $74,000 area? Why did we stop there? Well, guys, if you have a look, I'm not going to go back really past the past two cycles. I think these are more relevant, but if you have a look at the simple Fibonacci retracements and extensions, what you will notice is that Bitcoin generally tends to break past the 4.23%. It's done it in every single cycle except for the previous one. The previous one did not go as high as we had anticipated. As you can see right here, this area, we got up to the 3.618, which was basically right around that Bitcoin top. And then we never got up to the 4.236. And guess where that level comes in, guys? That comes in at around $73,134. And as you guys could see, basically, for example, using the Kraken exchange, that is exactly where we topped out. Now, why is this happening? Well, it could simply be because you had a lot of people who bought in this very high range. Maybe they're non-believers, they've been sitting on their Bitcoin and they've finally broken even and just made a little bit of a profit. And they're like, you know what? It's been 2 years. I've had enough of this. I can't deal with this. I'm just going to sell. That's one possibility, right? Other possibility is the fact that we've just literally gone up for 6 straight weeks without really any significant correction. If we come over here, if you're just looking at this very basic TA, right? We were in this ascending parallel channel. We had a bit of a bearish fake out right here. Hey, maybe this is a bullish fake out, right? Or maybe we just have to come down, retest the top of this area. Say we came straight down today. That's about $60,000, right? And if Bitcoin was to fall from that area, let's just do some really quick, math. If we were to fall down, that's about a 20% pullback, which is kind of what you would expect in a Bitcoin uptrend, right? If we look at some of the shorter Fibonacci extensions, just based off this previous dip that we had at the sell the news event, right, for the ETF, well, then again, this is why we see this area of interest coming in right around that 69,000 area, and the next area would be around 87, right? Now, if you did have a pullback, well, we still do have this parabolic trend right here, and like a lot of people have pointed out, if you do technical analysis, typical TA, usually these tend to have 4 points of contact, and currently we've only had about 3 points of contact, right? So this would suggest that if we are going to have, this textbook sort of parabolic pattern, that maybe we have one more test, and then we do end up, at least coming up to that 2.618 on the move at around $87,000. But the main thing to pay attention to, and really why there is no need for panic, is because once we move into this green area on the guppy, these are all different EMAs, we tend to stay above this for very long, right? And what happens is you'll tend to dip down into this green zone, as you can see back here. It happens multiple times. You see all these green arrows right there, and really what those represent are amazing opportunities to re-enter the market, right? There's nothing on these charts that's showing that we've topped out officially at all. In fact, it's showing that we've only just begun. But as you guys can see, we're pretty far away from dipping back into that green area, right? And of course, we're not going to fall straight down because obviously, even if the price was to, let's say, come down, these bands would still continue to move to the upside, right? So, tapping that is very common also in multiple bull trends, and we also have all of the moving averages supporting it. The most noticeable is this green 21 exponential, where generally once we start, I'll go back even farther just to show you, we tend to stay above it for quite a long time, and then once we start to interact with it a little bit too much, sorry about all the drawings right here, guys, you guys can see, let me just get those off again. Once we start to interact with them a little bit too much, what basically happens is that is the signal that the markets are coming to an end. Something else interesting to note, just before I get into the rest of the video, is if you look at the market cipher down here on the weekly, right? We have a lot of this money flow. And once this money flow starts to get around that 50 to 75% area, it tends to stay there for a very long time, signaling that we are at the beginning or, worst case scenario, the middle of the run. And as you guys can see right here, it looks like we've only just begun. In fact, you want to see something even crazier? Shout out to CryptoFace for pointing this one out. We have barely even entered the green on the 2 week, right? So you can see right here, barely entering the green, that would be like buying Bitcoin for around $600, to $1,000 back in 2016, or it would be the equivalent of buying Bitcoin, around $11 to maybe $15,000 back in 2020. So basically the point that I'm trying to make right here is that it's not really anything to freak out over, right? But there are a lot of new people in the space, and this is where this ties into the we have a problem, right? It's not Bitcoin itself, it's just the psychology of the markets, right? The first problem is that there's a lot of people that are coming into crypto right now, and they feel that they're just too late. I've been hearing that all over, right? Not so much the new people coming into the space, but the people that have been looking at Bitcoin, they've been thinking about allocating, and they just haven't quite pulled the trigger. They feel that they have missed out and that price is too high. But the funny thing is we have already heard this song, all right? Now just think about it right now. I'm not saying Bitcoin's gonna crash to $20,000, but if Bitcoin did crash to $20,000, I've heard a lot of people, I would love Bitcoin to go back to 30,000 or 20,000 so I could buy cheap, right? But the funny thing is that when Bitcoin was $20,000, everyone said it was too high and they didn't want to buy at those levels, right? And what ended up happening? Well, Bitcoin went to 69,000 anyway. And like Lawrence Lepard points it out, a lot of these people that are waiting or they don't want to buy or they're sitting on the sidelines, they really tend to regret it down the line.
Look, if you look at it historically, I think the volatility is becoming less over time. There's some evidence of that. But having said that, I think everybody needs to be prepared to deal with the volatility, and everybody needs to think long term. And because long term, I'm quite confident that this is going to be a multi-million-dollar per coin asset. And so if you're buying it at 72 today, You know, you're feeling. I mean, it feels like you're paying too much, but you know, I one of the great stories from Madeira. Somebody told me they knew Max pretty well. I guess when Max was buying his first coins, he paid, and this is Max Kaiser, he was paying 50 cents. And he felt like he'd overpaid because Trace Meyer, who's a true OG, was buying his at 30 cents. So, I mean, pretty much everybody who's in Bitcoin feels like they're too late and they're overpaying until about 5 or 10 years go by. And then you're thinking, you know, and people are going to be saying, what do you mean? Hang on, you have one whole coin? What are you talking about? That's
or you bought Bitcoin under 100K. Wow. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I bought my first ones at $300. Not enough, obviously. That's the other feeling that's the feeling everybody in the space has too. I wish I'd bought more. Well, we all do. You know, that's just the nature of it. But buy what you can because it's a superior savings technology. And then, you know, sit back and go live your life and do things you enjoy, knowing that your money is not being debased, which is it's a very comforting feeling, right?
The second major problem that most people have with Bitcoin is they have way too short term of a horizon, right? They are not looking for the longer gains for Bitcoin because they just want to get in, they want to get out, right? And the reality is if your time horizon for Bitcoin is shorter than 4 years, right? Because the 4-year cycle, whether or not you think it's going to happen, the majority of people think that's not what's going to happen this time. But statistically, if you had a 98% cash allocation in your portfolio and a 2% Bitcoin allocation, even if you bought at the all-time highs for each cycle, you made a minimum of a 3x return, and you always outperformed the S&P by a landslide. Just listen to Michael Saylor explain why this longer-term horizon is necessary to truly be successful in Bitcoin.
The wild fluctuations in price, how do you think about that?
If you're buying Bitcoin with a time horizon of less than 4 years, I don't think you should buy it. No one's ever lost money buying Bitcoin and holding it over 4 years. But if you want something to not fluctuate in value in 4 weeks or 4 months, then you should buy something else. So it all comes down to time horizon. The volatility itself is because it's not controlled. It's a global market. Anybody can trade it 24/7. You can read something on Twitter at 10:32 p.m. on Saturday night and panic, and then you can sell it. And then someone else will pile on to that. And there are reasons it's volatile. One reason is because it trades with 10x leverage. No one trades with more than 2x leverage on the US stock exchange. With equity, you can't.
Another problem is just simply greed. This kind of ties into what I said previously about that get rich quick scheme, right? So what happens is, again, and this is sort of a combination of 1 and 2, you have these new people coming in, or maybe they've been in the space for a little bit, who knows? Number one, they're saying Bitcoin is way too expensive. Well, I mean, Bitcoin might be expensive today, but when Bitcoin is $600,000, $700,000, $1 million, is $65,000, $70,000 really that expensive? But again, it's this short-term mind frame, and you can see right here, the fear and greed index is now up at 83. It's not, at the highest it's ever been, but it is pretty high. In fact, if we come down here to the max, okay, you could see that generally when it gets to these periods, you need to see those cool-offs. Now, I'm not trying to say that these new people that are getting into crypto, that they have to learn their lesson, right? But what I am saying is a lot of them think that they're just going to buy and it's just going to be the easiest ride straight to the moon. And let me tell you something, guys, that is not how it goes, right? And it's almost like you have to pay your dues, right? You have to go through these crashes so that you can sort of become like a member, I guess, of the Bitcoin community. But what this does in turn is it starts pushing a lot of people to these speculative altcoins. Now, you might have been noticing a lot of people on crypto Twitter have been talking about all these different meme coins, right? I'm not personally a fan of meme coins, but I'm not against them either. I understand that people like to gamble. But what this does is it starts sucking some of that money out of Bitcoin, maybe pulling it down a little bit as that greed starts to shift into the altcoins, right? And what that does is it sort of creates a bit of a reset. It hits that pause button and says, wait a minute, we're not all getting rich that fast. Bitcoin needs to show you who's king, right? And then that continues. Now, this is where the opportunities arise. And, I'm going to actually save this for the end of the video, but just to show you real quick, you could see the total altcoin market cap back here. This was during, well, this is currently where we're at right now. And this is obviously a linear scale of how crazy these altcoin cycles can get. So the reality is, unfortunately, and the Bitcoin maxis hate when you say this, and I think I've made it quite clear, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. Some people don't like to hear me say that, and I'm sorry. You know, I do trade altcoins, but I trade them in order to get more Bitcoin, or at least in hopes of getting more Bitcoin, right? More on that in a bit. But what I want to stick on right now, what I want to focus on is if you have a look at these power law of Bitcoin, right? It's sort of a virtuous cycle that just continues over and over again, right? It becomes a little bit of a demand of a store of value. Then obviously the Bitcoin price rises. This makes mining more profitable. This makes more capital expenditure into mining. Obviously we have the difficulty adjustment. This makes Bitcoin's network more secure by increasing the hash rate. And then this goes back into just increasing its demand as a store of value. And Fred Krueger was over here on Kitco News, and he was explaining why, you know, again, look at the longer term horizon, but this could escalate a lot faster than most people are anticipating.
So this chart was discovered by an astrophysicist named Giovanni. And when you're looking at things in astrophysical time frames, you need to look at things that are very small or very small, and then things that are very big, like the distance of the size of the Milky Way, right? So you tend to look at things on a logarithmic scale. And the way of representing relationships in this so-called log space is very natural for physicists. And so it's not crazy that a physicist would have first seen this this relationship. So if you look at that graph and you look at the price of Bitcoin in the logarithm of the price of Bitcoin, and you look at it in relationship to the logarithm of the time elapsed since the Genesis block, you will see that it's a straight, it sort of wobbles around a straight line right from the very first year of Bitcoin to now. And that straight line means that because that straight line is in log space, log space, right? That means that the actual price of Bitcoin is roughly time to the power 6, okay? Now, you would sort of say, well, that's exponential. It's not exponential. What it is it's a polynomial, right? It's a 6th power. So you know what a parabola is. Parabola is like x squared, right? A cube is even more faster. The cubic is even more fast than a parabola. It's x to the cube. Well, this is x to the power 6. And that's roughly how much Bitcoin price goes up in time. And I can put that in complete perspective because I was asked to explain this. Somebody was asking me this earlier today, and I was like, well, let me give you an example of what that means. We've been in Bitcoin. Bitcoin has existed for 15 years now. Where will Bitcoin price be if the same pattern continues in another 15 years? Will it be double the current price? No. It'll be 2 to the power 6, the current price, which is 64 times as high as it is right now, right? So that's what a power law says, that if you double the amount of time, you get 2 to the power 6 higher in price. So 64 times higher in price. Now, that seems crazy, but that's exactly what Bitcoin has been doing over the last 15 years. I mean, exactly.
So in 15 years' time, Bitcoin at 70,000 times 64. I can't do the math in my head, but that's your price target.
Yeah, I mean it's around 4.5 million roughly. I mean, that's kind of what a power law says, right? So a power law says you're going from 70,000 to 4.5 million in 15 years. Now, again, you could sort of say, well, that sounds crazy. Why is it going so much? Well, it's not totally crazy. I mean, the price of Amazon has gone up 100 times over the last, the price of Apple computer has gone up 100 times since they released the iPhone. That was one of my biggest mistakes, I think, was I bought shares of Apple when they released the Apple iPhone. I sold them 3 years later at the price doubled, right? Now, had I held them, I would have made 50 times more money than I had by selling them 3 years later, right? So you tend to underestimate how much these things can go up.
So you might be familiar, you may not be familiar, but I love showing this chart. It's the Lindy Effect. The Lindy Effect, in a nutshell, if I could just explain it to a 5-year-old, basically states that the longer something has been around, the odds it will be around for about the same time, right? Increase. So if Bitcoin's been around for 15 years, then logically it should be around for another 15 years. And if you have a look down here, digital scarcity, it's a collectible at first, speculation, greater security, and then you see this star, we are here. This is where we move into the greater perceived safety, greater education, more liquidity, right? We're going to get more liquidity as price goes up, as these ETFs continue to suck up the Bitcoin, you know what I'm saying? And then what do? You get to a reliable store of value. Now, are we there just yet? I think Bitcoin is a phenomenal store of value, again, if you have that long-term time horizon. Some people say it's a terrible store of value. It's too volatile. It falls 70%. Yeah, it falls 70%, but then it blows those lows out of the water 5 to 10x like every single time. And I've already talked about my diminishing price theory and why we might be in for a shock this time around, but ultimately it moves to a widespread medium account, greater price stability, convenient unit of account, and finally it becomes full global money. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that to me seems like it could be a little bit far away. I don't think this is something that's gonna happen tomorrow or next week, but I think that in our lifetimes, we are going to see the $1 million Bitcoin, maybe even we see a $5 million Bitcoin, who knows? And I do believe it will be perceived finally as that store of value. And I think a lot of the gold ETFs moving into Bitcoin kind of are giving us some signals that that may already be the case, right? So, super quick, ending on this, what is my opinion on this? Well, I actually fall into the category of neither the shortened or the super. Believe it or not, guys, I am actually staying with the 4-year cycle for now. I'm willing to be proven wrong. If anything, it does seem a little bit like it could be a shortened cycle only because of how fast we've gone up. To be totally honest with you, I would like to see a bit of a pullback consolidation. Not that I'm a bear. Obviously, I'd love to buy cheap again, but really, you need to create that stability. You need to create that price floor. And we're not really doing that right now, right? We're just going up and up and up. And that's usually when, the faster you go up, the harder you fall, right? And that could be an even larger drawdown. So if you want to avoid these 40, 50% drawdowns, it would be a lot more healthy to have these 20, 30% drawdowns, in the meantime. So that's basically that. But, the thing that a lot of people have to consider, even with these ETFs, is number one, it's only been around for about 2 months. Okay, 2 months in the grand scheme of things is absolutely nothing. In fact, within the 2 months that Bitcoin's ETF has existed, we outperformed the gold ETF when it launched back in 2004 because gold's ETF actually went sideways for 10 straight months before really having that price discovery breakout. So we've already seen that, okay? So just keep in mind it is still early. And the second thing regarding the ETFs is, okay, great, the ETFs have opened up the doors, but that doesn't mean that all these institutions and pension funds and family offices, et cetera, are diving into it, right? In fact, a lot of them have these very strict rules or, not necessarily rules, but sort of parameters where, just because something goes live, they want data. They want to see how has the ETF been performing. And a lot of them are going to wait 2 months, 4 months, even 6 months. I know that sounds crazy, before they start allocating the possibility of the capital for their clients on their behalf, right? So, a lot of these guys are just going to sit back, they're going to watch it, and once they have enough data to say, hey, yeah, this thing is stable enough, it's performing well, then you're going to see those extra different capitals come in. And not to mention sovereign wealth funds, which we've talked about a lot. We talked a lot about this like 2 years ago, and we really haven't seen a lot of them come in yet, right? I mean, yes, El Salvador has it as, a unit. I believe they're allowing it as not a unit of account, but as an official currency. But I believe we will start to see more and more nation states putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And, if you think that you're too late, again, you really have to consider you know, yes, you could argue like I didn't buy Bitcoin at $5 or $10, but this is the first time that Wall Street is actually getting access to this product. So, and it's the only ETF that has a finite amount, right? All ETFs can be changed. They can add as many as they want. They can, you know, whatever, but not with Bitcoin. We only have 21 million coins. So very, very different animal. Lots of different things that we could talk about, but this is where I want to end today's video. I want to talk about my strategy. Now, I don't know if this is going to trigger anybody, but if you've been following my channel for a long time, first of all, the name of this channel is Crypto Zombie. And when we first got into crypto, we had looked at everything, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these different altcoins, right? Now, the longer you stay in crypto, the more you are, and this is just, I've seen it time and time again, the more you will gravitate towards Bitcoin, okay? Especially once you go through a bear market. But the reality is, going way back to what I said earlier, you know, if we just have a look, for example, at this altcoin chart, you could see how crazy and speculative this greed can get. And what I plan on doing and what I am currently doing is taking advantage of that greed, okay? Look, if these guys want to come in, they want to try to make a quick buck, great. You know what? You can ride those waves, because here's the reality, and you know, I just have to say this out loud. The truth is, even though you know, and I've explained to you guys about the 4 years cycle and the long-term, you know, future for Bitcoin, all that stuff, you guys know all that, but the average person coming in, fresh, brand new into crypto, right? Maybe they dabble in a little bit of Bitcoin, and then what do? They go, well, if Bitcoin's at $70,000, in order for me to double my money, Bitcoin has to go to $140,000. You know what they're going to do? They're not going to buy Bitcoin. They're going to buy Shiba Inu and meme coins and shit coins and any other coin in hopes of getting a 10, 100, 1000x. And you know what actually ends up happening? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't have to time the beginning, and you don't have to time the end. You don't have to buy the bottom. You don't have to sell the top. You just have to get the middle of that mania phase. And generally speaking, once Bitcoin tends to break its all-time high, that's when people say it's getting too expensive, and they start looking into these smaller altcoins. So that is sort of just, you know, a bit of my opinion about what could be happening, but also based on what I've seen historically, that is what happened. So again, to answer, what am I doing? Currently, I am definitely, as far as my crypto portfolio is concerned, way over allocated to Bitcoin. Most people would tell me I have way too much Bitcoin and I'm crazy. My portfolio currently today is around 95% Bitcoin, 5% altcoins. Now, as some of these altcoins are going to go to zero, they're going to go fall 99%, they're total gambles, they're total risks, right? But if out of that 5%, you have, you know, a handful that end up doing well, because inevitably they will, well, then you can turn that 5% into 30%. Now you have 70% Bitcoin, 30% altcoins from the few that did well. And what I do is I take that and I reallocate it into Bitcoin, because I'm going to tell you right now, guys, I don't hold altcoins for long term. It's not a matter of, you know, pumping and dumping, not like that at all. It's just I don't marry them. And just a little bit of good advice. If you guys are in the altcoin markets, the simplest, I mean, it's the easiest strategy you could ever do. You just sell half at a double. Okay, maybe your coin doesn't double at that, you know, at that point, okay, I guess you're stuck. But if you've bought an altcoin and you've made double, just sell half. Get your initial capital back. You can hold it in, you know, stable coins if you want. You know, I like to put it back into Bitcoin. That's just my strategy. But that is what I'll be doing for the rest of this market. And if you guys want to learn about what I'm doing with different types of altcoins, I may talk about them on this channel, although I do prefer to keep this more of a Bitcoin focused channel. You guys let me know again. But what you can do is you can join the free Telegram group down below in the subscription. Not subscription, it's actually a free group. Which, by the way, if you ever get reached out by a crypto zombie claiming to be me, asking for money or saying that I have a deal, guys, I don't have any paid subscriptions. I don't have signals. I don't charge money for anything on this channel. All of my content is free. So if you want to join that Telegram group below, or just go follow me on Twitter, you know, I do talk about some altcoins. I will retweet some stuff over there. You know, that will be sort of what I'm doing. And again, I am not looking for long-term holds here when it comes to altcoins. I'm looking to ride some of the hype. Now, what are some of the hype areas that I'm looking at? Well, in the past, you know, we've had layer ones, layer twos, DeFi in and of itself at one time was a bit of a buzzword, you know, and what I'm looking at now is basically three main areas. I'm looking into crypto gaming because in my opinion, I think the last cycle had very premature crypto games. They didn't really look that great. They didn't play that great. I think the adoption could be there for that. In fact, there's I don't know if I could really talk about this yet. It hasn't come out yet, but there is one particular blockchain game that is going to be released on a major console. Like as in like Xbox, PS5 type stuff like that, right? So that could be one to pay attention to. Just throwing it out there. I'll let you know when that happens. And then also I'm looking into AI. Now AI, you guys have seen Nvidia moved into the top 10. Okay, so I think a lot of these speculators, they're going to be hopping into crypto again. The ones that think Bitcoin is too expensive, which it's not. Okay, again, as I must put this in the middle of talking about altcoins, you got to get to that one Bitcoin, or at least you have to try, because, yeah, I think history speaks for itself. But AI, again, I think is going to be a very big narrative. There's a lot of AI coins that we've seen popping off recently. I think there's only going to be more to come from that sector. And the third sector is what I think is going to be building on top of Bitcoin, BRC20, ordinals, things like that. And what's crazy about this is, so you have a lot of the Bitcoin maxis that won't touch any of the altcoins, right? But what's interesting, because I talk to a lot of people and I know what a lot of people are doing in the background, you're seeing these maxis slowly be like, well, I guess if they're building on Bitcoin, then it's okay. You see what I'm saying? So that sector, a lot of these OGs, I mean, I'm talking guys from 2013, billionaires, they're going to be allocating to the Bitcoin sector, the ordinal sector, or the BRC20s, because that's where they feel comfortable and they're not straying too far from their home base, right? So that's what I'm looking at. So, as of right now, 95% Bitcoin for me, 5% altcoins. Maybe you want to get a little more risk adverse, that's fine. But at the end of the day, a lot of these altcoins, especially, within the cycle, are going to fall 90 to even 99%, and some of them may never come back. But if you can take the opportunity to get in on some of these in order to acquire more Bitcoin, then I'm not gonna be mad at you and I'm not gonna judge you, because that's what smart people would do, okay, when you have the opportunity. But again, like I said, I don't want to ramble any longer. Long term for me, the vision will always be Bitcoin. But, I really do believe we're entering the part of the cycle where you're going to see these altcoins going absolutely crazy, right? In fact, even when Bitcoin tends to reach its all-time high and then fall down, you usually see a couple weeks to a month of insane altcoins, because what they're doing is they're rotating into it, trying to like milk the market for like the last hurrah, right? So again, guys, if you want me to talk about more of that content, like, I'm not going to like shill altcoins. I'm not going to say you should buy them. I'll just tell you what I'm buying. But again, when I buy an altcoin, my strategy is I do take back my initial investment once I hit a double. And then I kind of just ride it. We do some analysis. We look at some levels, basic. Obviously, it's hard doing TA on altcoins unless they really have higher market caps. When they're lower, they're just like all over the place. But I think at the end of the day, I don't want to really ramble on too much about the altcoins. I want to just make a point that it should become your absolute goal to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. And yes, at some point, my friends, this cycle is going to come to an end. But the cycle for Bitcoin has been up and to the right only for the past 15 years. So the idea of all of a sudden the bubble's gonna pop and Bitcoin's gonna go to zero, I just don't subscribe to that. And I think the longer time goes on, the Lindy Effect, people waking up, the debasement of their currencies, okay, hyperinflation, that's a real thing in a lot of countries. I think Bitcoin is going to be that store of value, and it's only a matter of time. It just depends on your horizon and if you have the patience to persevere through, the multiple cycles. So that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. You guys rock. I love you. A little bit of a random video today, but I really felt we needed to talk about where we are in the cycle, what is going on, why Bitcoin remains the ultimate apex predator. But let's not be idiots here, okay? Would I sell all my Bitcoin? Hell no, I wouldn't. But would I put 5% into some altcoins over the next 6 to 8 months? Absolutely. And if that triggers people, I'm sorry. I'm trying to accumulate more Bitcoin. So that's it for me today, guys. Stick around. I will be, giving you updates on that. Join the Telegram. I'll drop things as they, come out over there. And basically that's it for me. So thank you so much for coming back to the channel. If you guys do want to learn how to trade, check out these tutorials. There's lots of bonuses below. Some of them are just for depositing. You don't even have to trade. So until next time, guys, stay crypto. And of course, peace out.